Hello, I'm Deborah Hills from Queen Mary's School of the Arts. Welcome to Get Spotted. This podcast series is part of our QM Elevate programme, designed to help you build confidence and develop the communication skills you need to succeed at university and in your future career. In each episode, we'll talk with students, alumni and academics from different disciplines and see how engaging with assignments can be a game changer, helping you refine your communication skills and stand out in the workplace. Let's get started. This episode is medicine.
I think that's a big change in medicine, that it's a lot more discussion based and the patient and the doctor feedback off each other rather than the doctor just giving, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it.
Okay, so this episode is with our medics, and we are looking in particular at an examination called the OSCE. So first of all, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Deborah. Harvey?
I'm Harvey.
Tell us about you.
I didn't know how much we were saying. I am head of the Clinical and Communication Skills Unit within the medical school.
Great.
I'm Pran. I'm a newly qualified doctor, so I've been a doctor for a year now.
Excellent.
I'm Olivia and I have just finished my final year examinations in March and I will be starting work as a doctor in August of this year.
Excellent. So, Harvey, tell us about the OSCE and what you teach.
So I guess a definition would be quite helpful. It stands for Objective Structured Clinical Examination. And what that means is it's the examination of the student's ability, but not just their knowledge, but also their skills. The clinical part is about situations that a student would expect to see, or a doctor would expect to see in practice. Someone, a clinician or an academic, is marking the student against what we're asking for in this situation. And if it was taking someone's height or measuring their weight, that you could say, yep, that student's got that right. But if it's empathy or something like that, then it takes the clinician's judgment to say whether it is or not. So I would say it's not objective, but O is that's what the O stands for.
Okay, great.
So I don't know about the objectivity for you, Tim.
Yeah, I think OSCEs are very subjective, right?
I think very much when you come into that room and you know what I mean, you don't know who's had a good day or a bad day the day before, and if they're marking you, I'm not saying that to say that markers are harsh, but you know what I mean, you don't know as the student when you're going in, and some of them have poker faces, some of them will give you a nice smile and a nod, and that might be falsely reassuring that they've given you a smile and a nod. So I think it's hard to know, but it's important to always go into the exam, you know what I mean, focused on the exam itself rather than the factors that you can't control within the exam, and the examiner is one of those factors. So
Yeah, and I think because all the stations are typically, it's three people. It's yourself, the examiner, and then the patient. And it's that balance of like, how much do I ignore the examiner and just focus on the patient? Or how much do you want to play into the examiner as well? And do I want to try and get them on my side as well? Or do I want to just focus on the patient? As long as our connection's good, I'm hoping the examiner will pick up on it and reward me for it. So
And is that the right way to be?
I think so.
Yeah.
You can, say hi to the examiner, acknowledge they exist at the least. But I think if they chime in, great. But it's just you and the patient, or the stimulating patient.
I think it's a really important point. So as an examiner, I try and be as small as possible. I kind of get myself into a corner, and because I think I'm trying to observe this. I'm not trying to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But of course, there are some stations where you're asked questions and you're expected to respond to the examiner. So understanding what's required, it can be difficult. But my suggestion would be what you do is try and engage the patient first of all, and if the examiner says anything, then respond to them, but otherwise ignore them.
And I found there are some really nice times when I think that happens as you go through the years. You realise that the examiners are usually other staff members or doctors you might have seen around the hospital. So that's it. Well, it can work in your favor sometimes, where you go into a station, there's a friendly face, and you were so nervous about that station, and all of a sudden, the nerves just disappear.
Wow.
But yeah, I think I agree.
I think then another thing is like obviously the exam is supposed to be a replica of the clinical environment and what you would be doing as your job as a doctor. And while the examiner's there and they're not maybe to be interacted with in the same way, you might be in a situation as a doctor where you go into a room and they've got a family member with them, or you know what I mean, the patient is your priority, but there is also other people in the room. So being aware of other people and making sure that you do sort of interact with them appropriately, maybe not so much with the examiner, but I think having the main point of contact as the patient, but also then giving the opportunity in a real life setting for family members or support people to then come in and be part of the conversation with the patient, because I think that's a big change in medicine, that it's a lot more discussion based and the patient and the doctor feedback off each other rather than the doctor just giving, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. It's more, these are your options and where would you like us to go in your treatment plan or your recovery plan, or would you like to go into a care facility or would you like to be at home? And I think those are more open discussions that are a lot more common now in medicine, which sort of, I think engaging with others out with the patient is really important in that respect.
The knowledge is almost just a small part of the exam.
I wanted to come to this. So tell us what's the main part of the exam?
It's how are you going to handle this situation that's in front of you, right? You need the knowledge. There is no doubt about it. If it's an examination, you need to know how to do the examination. If it's a specific style of communication, you need to know the theory behind it. But it's how you play the room, how you interact with the person, when do you bring up certain things, the pace. That's so personal to what feels natural to you, and but you still have to do it in about 10 minutes.
Right.
That's the challenge, and it's almost a performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, right. Okay. Tell us more about how you teach this then.
Well, I guess, as Brad said, the knowledge part is important. That's part of what we're assessing is the knowledge, but it's assessing how someone would share that with a patient. So it's not just what do you know about a certain drug, because actually we could test that much easier. We could do an easy exam and sit down and write down everything you know about a drug, right? But actually we want to know that the student can convey this information to a patient in a way that's meaningful. So there's the content, there's the knowledge bit, but there's also the skills bit. So a lot of what we do in preparation for finals OSCEs is practice with students, first of all in the classroom, but then ultimately it's about students going out into clinical areas and talking to patients, because that's really how it's learned. We just start the process. This is kind of a framework for you, and we hope that you guys go out and talk to patients, and that's how you really learn.
Yeah.
Tell us about going out and talking to patients.
Especially in like first and second year, I remember when you're in these OSCEs for the first time, that there is an unofficial script that could get you through a station. You can learn the exact questions to ask a patient. You can memorize how to express empathy. And I think you do, because you're so nervous. And you're like, okay, if I just need to, in 10 minutes, I just need to read out all of these questions and then acknowledge them and then get through it. And it takes time and experience, going to placement, seeing people do it, to then unpack, hang on, why am I asking these questions? And then when you know the theory behind why you're asking a question, then you can step back and be like, okay, how would I actually word this question? What comes more naturally to me? And when you unlock that, this is what comes naturally to me, then you're less focused and pressurized to remember things, because as the conversation flows, these phrases that seem natural to you will just automatically come out, and then you're able to navigate that situation much more smoothly, I find.
Yeah, I think a big one is like the phrases thing. I think people get it into their minds that in the OSCE there is the perfect way to say something. And actually, having had various feedback, one big phrase that people use on Pran's example about how to show empathy is, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." And actually, when you go out on placement, talk to patients, especially so experience with simulated patients, so people sometimes get confused. So we have people who come in as actors who act as patients, and then you have sometimes volunteer patients who are real life people who have actually got these medical conditions. And a lot of the time, the feedback will be is you saying, "I'm sorry to hear that." It feels like an exercise that you're going through to make yourself feel better, and it actually does nothing for the patient. And I think a big thing about medicine is how you make the patient feel is very much a big part of your job. So going back to the phrasing thing, as Pran said, as you speak to real patients and have those real life encounters with real people, that is where you learn how to portray these phrases, because you're not going to say, "I'm sorry to hear that," if you can see it's going to make someone physically uncomfortable. Whereas in an OSCE, you might chuck it in because you think, "Oh, there's an extra point there." But actually, in real life, you will find phrases, and it might not be a phrase, it might be just having an extra moment's silence and not feeling you need to fill the space with something. And for lots of people, that is, a moment for everyone to reflect. And then you re enter the conversation and go forward from there. So if you've just given bad news, then it's okay, maybe what are our next steps? Or, you know what I mean? What can I do for you? And even sometimes, like in real life, I mean, I'm not actually English, but a big English thing is to offer someone a cup of tea. That is, you know what I mean, the done thing in society, and everyone finds that quite comforting. So in the OSCE, why wouldn't you offer them a cup of tea?
Yeah.
They'll not have the facilities to make it, but they're not going to mark you down for that. So I think it's just being aware how your real life experience translates more into the role of being a doctor than rote learning mark schemes to say the right thing for the examiner in an OSCE.
Can I say something then? That's really interesting about rote learning exams. We have talked before about, you had said, Olivia, that a lot of students have got their head in the books, terrified preparing for OSCEs. Is that the best way to prepare?
So I think like the big thing, yes, head in the books, the knowledge is a given, but I don't think you should sacrifice the exposure to patients and the, in a way, opportunity and privilege you have to spend talking to people in a real life medical setting and learning about them and learning about their conditions for spending time sitting doing endless number of past med questions. But that's my opinion personally. And I've always found talking to patients is actually the best way to learn the medical knowledge. So, you know what I mean? The first guy that I saw that had jaundice, he was yellow. And I'm not going to tell you his name because that would be breaking all sorts of rules. But I do remember his name and I remember his story. And he was a really interesting guy. And you know what I mean? I can see this person in front of me and think, okay, jaundice, what is that? And then that sort of triggers all the scientific bits, which are a bit less exciting than the in-person doctoring stuff.
Yeah, I think especially in the earlier years, I remember coming out of the OSCEs and you're not supposed to do this. And they specifically tell you you're not allowed to talk about the stations. But I think everyone knows that, people do. But you come out and, if there's a difficult communication station, people get together, they're like, "Oh, did you get this piece of information out of him? Oh, did you find out he had a dog? No. Oh, okay. Oh, no, I forgot to ask about the dog. I forgot to ask about the wife. Oh, no, I'm going to fail." And you just think it's about this, this mystery that you have to unlock, as opposed to what's actually the focus of the station is. Did you make the person feel listened to? Did that person come out of the exam, the situation, feeling comfortable, like they were listened to? And that carries a lot of weight, and that's what they're assessing. And you're right, that comes with seeing it being done. So in hospitals, just going with someone to see how they break bad news, and seeing someone do it badly in hospital. So oh, okay, that's definitely something I don't want to be doing. And how will you learn that unless you've seen it happen? You know how it makes the other person feel, and then you're like, okay, you build this like mental catalogue of phrases, environments that you prefer to do this, not prefer to do this. Do I want to break bad news in a crowded area, or do I want to try to create this illusion of privacy, even just by drawing the curtain, just so the patients have a bit of space to process? And it's that then you can apply to OSCEs, where you're happy to pause, take that extra second to breathe, because you're under so much pressure, because there is a time, the OSCE's time, so there's a bell that goes off when the station starts, there's a bell that goes off 2 minutes before it ends, so you know exactly how much time you have, which makes it hard to pause. And there is so much weight in letting a conversation breathe sometimes. And I think that helps distinguish people who've kind of seen these situations versus someone who's just going through the motion of it. Yeah.
I think it's quite safe for students to study in the library. You can go, you can learn a chapter, you can learn a system, you can learn a disease, and you can study it and you can know it inside out. Whereas going to a ward presumably feels you've got no idea what you're going to learn. You might not come away feeling I've learned something particular. I don't know this subject well, but it's over that time you're going to build up that pattern, and you're going to understand how these things work. I always think that we can tell when people have spent a lot of time in practice versus those that have struggled and avoided it, and it's probably my own perception of myself is that we think we can find out. But I think you can really see where it feels like a conversation, it feels natural, versus someone who's kind of trying to work the checklist and think, right, the buzzer's gone, so now I'm gonna wash my hands, as if we're gonna somehow mark that because it was in the timer and not in the so to me, I think you can kind of see that stuff where it falls naturally to people in conversation, and you see that in the classroom as well, not just in the OSCEs. You see where people have a natural conversation with someone as opposed to perhaps learning some of those stock phrases.
Yeah, but I appreciate it's hard for people. It's put you're very vulnerable in that situation, and you feel very anxious in that situation.
So I probably display nerves in the opposite way of normal people, in that lots of people probably get more introverted, and I sometimes become more extroverted when I'm feeling nervous. I think for me, I then sort of start to go a million miles an hour, and that in this scenario of the OSCE, fine, my brain maybe works at that speed, but because of the nature of my accent, I can then actually become quite hard to understand if I start talking too quickly. So I think that was a thing that someone always said to me: once you go in there, wait for 10 seconds and give yourself a minute. So they talk about that golden minute. So do your formalities, your introduction, who you are, find out who they are, sort of give an insight into what the station's asking you to do, and then give yourself 10 seconds before you start. There's no rush. And that was probably actually some of the feedback that I did get in my final year OSCE. The first station I did on the first day, it was like, felt a little rushed, take some time to, which, I mean, as I then went through the stations, I did feel I do that. But the first station, you know what I mean, of the first day can always be very tough. You might not know what the station is. And I think just taking a minute, and there's different exercises that you can do. There's something called box breathing, which is, I've tried that, which I did find help, but that was probably more for like a rest station activity. But yeah, for me, it's just taking a minute, I think usually is what I would say is the best thing. But everybody's different, and I think you need to be prepared to feel anxious, which scares people because who likes feeling anxious? So I think feeling uncomfortable and knowing that it's going to pass is going to allow you to perform the best that you can. And that's another thing that somebody said to me. It's like, you go to the wards all year, and yeah, fine, you go some days and you're like, I've achieved nothing. But a big thing for me, I was like, if you set targets for yourself in that when I was in the third year, someone said to me, the most important thing you can do this year is speak to patients and speak to as many patients as you can. And fine, we're maybe supposed to be in placement from 9 to 5, but I'd go in and think, okay, I'm going to speak to 2 patients today. Once I'd spoken to my 2 patients, it was almost then a reward. Okay, I've actually achieved what I needed to get out of today. I can go to the library. I can go to London Fields Lido for a swim in the midday sun. It depends what you prefer or what you feel is necessary for you. But I think having a focus doesn't necessarily have to be medicine related in terms of content, but thinking, okay, I'm maybe gonna take one set of bloods and speak to one patient. And if you're going to placement 5 days a week, which you do at some of the hospitals, I would say for me that's probably enough. And then you're using that other time constructively to consolidate the content in the library. So I think it's a balance, but I don't think it should all be one or all be the other. But I think time spent on the wards is always
And
right
that's
as well.
something that works for each person, right? Like for me, it was drama, but you know, everyone, I think you have to put yourself out there when you do medicine because it's so like public facing and
Absolutely.
you're constantly interacting with hundreds of people.
Mhm.
You know, like in just a span of a week, you interact with so many people and you will not remember them all. But how do you prepare yourself? So I think it's about finding just one thing that works for you that you do alongside medicine. Because for me that was drama, but for someone else it's
Tell us what that was
sports.
for you, Olivia.
Well, I do a lot of sports, different sports. I played hockey and tennis, while at Barts, and actually a big thing for me was I love the university community, but actually having things outside of university and different, not so much activity, but seeing different people outside the realms of medicine was really beneficial for me, I thought. In terms of when we're all together as a group of medics, our default conversation can sometimes always come back to medicine, which is fine because we've all got that in common. But if I go and see maybe some of my school friends who live in London or go out with different people, you know what I mean? The trajectory of the conversation is completely different and you get different insights into how people think. So we probably all say we're more on the sciencey side, whereas people who do arts and humanity, the way they process information, the way they talk about things, have different opinions, is really beneficial then when you talk to patients because patients come from all walks of life. So it then allows you to use your own personal experience and interact with them on a personal level in that you feel comfortable talking to different people. And the more people you talk to, the easier it becomes. Like the more marathons you run, I'm sure the more it becomes easier to run a marathon, you would hope. Otherwise people wouldn't keep doing it. So you know what I mean? It's sort of one of those things that, you know, putting yourself out there, as Pran said, and like giving yourself exposure to as many experiences and people as possible will put you in good stead, not only for the OSCE, but actually when you start work as a doctor, which I think is sometimes lost in the whole preparing for exams.
And I think when you apply to get into medicine, there is, you know, you don't get into medicine unless you have the grades. It's almost just this, it's just one box that you're ticking, which is, you know, spending so much time focused on getting the grades. You're expected to have other things alongside that. You're expected to have maybe done some volunteering, be part of sports societies. So I would say for the vast majority of people who do medicine, there is something else that you're interested in, be it sports, video games, anything that helps, you know, build you that character that you need in order to put yourself out there, be vulnerable. But I think it's very easy to lose that when you start medicine because I don't know about you, but when you know, at school, if you're doing medicine, you're applying for medicine, you are very, very good at school. You are the big fish in that pond. And then suddenly you put all of these big fish together in medical school, and then it can massively knock your confidence. It did for me. And you feel, okay, the only way out of this is for me to just sit at the library every day and memorize everything that I could possibly memorize. Otherwise, I'm not going to get through it. But that's not true. it's not what works for everyone, and you find what works for you. But I think it took me a while to just reconnect with the things that did work for me, and I think creating that like personalized approach helped me focus and be myself in OSCEs, and I think that's what helped me the most in that setting, as opposed to just trying to fit this rigid mold of what was expected. Because I don't think there is just one way to answer these questions. I find it in the exams, the approach people have is so different.
Yeah, but I suppose under the pressure of exams,
Yeah.
and let's be clear, OSCEs aren't the only exams you do. There are
Yeah.
knowledge exams and other exams. So it's not everybody needs to kind of abandon the books. But we talk about respectful curiosity for our patients, that what we want people to do is show interest in our patients. And in an exam, that's rewarded by the simulated patient. If you show an interest in a simulated patient, even if they're in role, they will reward you. They will give you more information, and they have a role in the market. They give their mark. So you're kind of getting marks for the academic part, kind of showing respectful curiosity, and you're getting marks from the simulated patient. And I think that's what patients want to feel. I think they don't need to know that you know every bit of medical information.
No.
What they want is to feel that in this moment of distress or vulnerability or discomfort or shock or horror, whatever it is they're experiencing, there's somebody there with them that understands what they're experiencing, not as a psychotherapist, not as a kind of with you, but actually who wants to be have news broken to them by a robot who shows no emotion, who just, I'm here just to tell you what's up and then I'm on to the next person. You want someone to be with you in that moment and kind of experience it with you. And I think that's what we're trying to teach, is people to be kind of there with patients, and the importance of the medical information is paramount. Is really important. But actually, to have a human to human contact, I think is kind of what patients are after in that moment.
I don't think I quite appreciated that until I started working, because in medical school, you are expected to, you want to know all of the answers and you want to be prepared as well as you could for that station. But in real life, there's constantly points where, I think as a first year doctor, you are quite protected. You have a bigger team around you who are happy to do things for you. If there is some breaking bad news that you really don't want to do, someone will do it for you. But for how long? You are going to have to, take that first step and do it. And I've been in that situation where I'm, maybe explaining a diagnosis to someone, but they ask me a question and I don't know the answer. It takes a lot of awareness of your own ability to then step back and be like, that's a really good question, and I think it's important we talk about it, but I don't know how to answer that, or I don't have the answer to your question. But what I can do is I can go discuss it with my registrar, my consultant, and why don't I come back in a little bit and then we can explain it a bit more. And that is, it's you could still do that in the OSCE, and I think it would be really amazing if you can express that in an OSCE, because that shows you have insight into your own boundaries. Because I think I started doing my 5th year exam where I was like, oh, they've just asked me the side effects of this medication that I really should know, but I have no idea in this moment. But I've seen people do it in real life. And so I was like, I'm not aware of all of the side effects, but what I can do is I can go have a look. I can come back with my colleague and then we can go through it in a bit more detail. Brilliant. You've handled it. And I think patients want to see that. They don't expect you to have all the answers. I think it's very, very rarely have I seen someone would get upset with you if you were upfront and honest about it. Yeah.
I think a big thing that's drilled into you is it's worse to say something that you're not sure of and it be wrong. So I think, to follow on what Fran says, if you really don't know, and you know what I mean, when you get into that situation, especially in an exam, it can then start to build up. You're like, oh my word, I don't know that. Oh, it's all going to go wrong. And then that can sort of spiral, and one station might lead into the next. And then that's maybe where you don't get the outcome that you want at the end of the day. And I think knowing before you go in there that, in my mind, if I don't know, it's okay not to know. And if I say that, it will all be okay. It's not, it almost feels like an embarrassment, or like you have a lack of knowledge, but people, you know what I mean? You forget things. Like, you might meet someone that you've met 3 times before and forget their name. You know what I mean? It's okay to ask again, or to be like, oh, I need to go and check the patient's name or something. You know what I mean? Like, small details and things. It's okay to forget things. And that's where medicine differs from the exam. While, yes, I shouldn't be Googling every answer to every question every patient asks me, but you do have resources around you, and obviously use the correct websites on Google, not Wikipedia or something, to be diagnosing someone.
OSCE is a skill that you develop, and why not actually keep using it? So I've found multiple times where, I have to break bad news, but I'm really nervous about it. And as a, F1 doctor, you're never in that position where you have to do something alone if you don't want to. Your registrars, your consultants are around, and they'd be more than happy to do it for you. But at some point, you do have to do it. And when you feel you're ready to do it, I will just practice with my registrar. I'll be like, okay, I need to tell the patient they have this. Can you just pretend to be the patient? Let's just go through it quickly and be really, really difficult about it, so I can prepare myself for the worst. And it's this skill that you've developed for all these years, and it's for a reason. And it gets you out of those situations because it becomes so natural to you. I don't know. You might do it when you're in that situation.
Not sure that'll be top of my list of activities when on the ward round, but we'll see. I'll get back to you on that one.
It's like seeing all the times that you saw it work in real life in hospitals, and think of the OSCE as that really, and your chance to exhibit those traits. I saw all of these amazing things work in real life. All these doctors use these strategies. Let me try and use them here. And I think it really does come across. And if you get partway down and you run out of time, I think they might make the decision. They could tell, okay, they're going down the right track. They probably would have hit this point anyway. And I think that's what they want to see.
Wonderful. And I guess I'm going to close up here, but I'm hearing, yes, you need your medical knowledge. Of course you need your medical knowledge, but as a communicator, being flexible, being empathetic, being open and being authentic. Are there any other words that I need to use?
Just being you.
Yeah. Being you.
Absolutely. There's a balance, isn't there? Because you're performing being a doctor, even though you're not a doctor. These are kind of clinical situations that you're asked to kind of put yourself across in a certain way. But I think the best ones are where people are themselves in that context. So imagine yourself being a doctor, being yourself, but in this role. And those are the most authentic. Those are where you get the best interaction from your simulated patient, because they can be relaxed.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when you get those moments in I don't know, Breaking Bad news session where you can see everybody's on the verge of tears. It's like, wow, that's really, everybody knows we're sitting in a classroom. Everybody knows this isn't real, but actually it can be really powerful, really kind of fun learning, difficult, but fun way to learn, for at least a way of teaching. It's about experiential learning. It's not about standing up there telling people how to do it, but giving people the opportunity to try things out and make mistakes. That's fine, but in a way that's not going to upset anybody or affect anybody's care.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and I hope that helps anyone listening about the OSCEs and anyone about going to medicine as a career. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll find all of the links discussed on the Get Spotted webpage. And if you want help in developing your communication skills, why not sign up for the Communicate with Impact Masterclass or one of our other modules, free to all QM students. Details on the QM Elevate webpage.